Right, according to my watch, it's bang on 7 o'clock, so we can start now. Thank you, everybody. I just about made it through the traffic. First of all, we'll start with the minutes of the meeting on the 22nd of February 2002. Sorry, wrong one, sorry. Minutes of the meeting, 28th of July 2022. I was happy to approve the minutes, correct? Yeah. So I beg your pardon, I've jumped ahead. Any apologies for absence? Are we all here?
Thank you, Chair. We do have apologies from Councillor Churchman and Councillor Fish.
Okay, thank you. Items of urgent business. I haven't received any items of urgent business. Councillor Maney.
Sorry, just on apologies. Councillor Rigby has standing apologies, obviously, because of her injury.
Thank you. Declarations of interests. Councillor Kent.
Just need to declare on the feedback from the consultation from the taxi drivers. I know one of them that has responded to the consultation.
Okay, thank you. Page 9 to 26, review of street trading policy. So, and licensing manager, all eligible. Give an overview, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report tonight brings back the revised street trading policy following the consultation that's been undertaken. A copy of the revised policy is attached as Appendix 1 to the report. The policy was consulted upon and that included writing to all of the licence holders and referencing the policy to them, outlining the changes and asking for comment. It was also circulated amongst other responsible authorities, etc. We actually only received one response back, and that was from Michelle Cunningham, the Community Safety Partnership Manager, and her response is there as 3.3 of the report. When we looked at the responses, or the response, and also consideration was given to the comments received at the licensing committee at the last meeting, we made the following changes, and those changes are detailed in 3.4 of the report. So we looked at the requirement for a DBS for all employees that were involved with the business, and we've reduced that down to only ensure that the DBS check is carried out of the applicant or the consent holder, and requiring the applicants to submit a DBS check that's not more than 12 months old, which will help those that have got a number of street trading permits with us, so they can get a DBS each year and provide that to us for every application. And just in reflection to not require a DBS check for persons working on the stall, just require that the applicant, where necessary in relation to exploitation training, will send their staff and themselves on any exploitation required. Sorry, not required. Any exploitation training that the council deems necessary, and that would predominantly be around people like the ice cream traders and anyone providing sort of late night refreshment, and that's really in response to the request of Michelle Cunningham, the Community Safety Partnership Manager. I think that's probably all I need to say, unless there's any questions that you have in relation to that.
Okay, Councillor Elijah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report. I just have a slight question to ask regards to 3.2, which is on page 10. The revised policy was a consultation that invited all street traders, and only one comment was received. How many street traders are we talking about?
I can give you an approximate number. We're probably talking about 30 street trading licenses or consents that we issue at the moment. That's a combination of mobiles for ice cream vans, etc., and some fixed position ones.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that only one person, one trader, reported back and commented.
It wasn't even a trader.
It's not even a trader. So obviously the street traders, which this policy is being targeted, have not reported back. So, what's the method of consultation? Is there anything we can do to get some more feedback from these traders?
I mean, it's difficult. We found with on any of the sort of the policy things we found with the taxi policy, we didn't get a huge raft of comments back on that. We have sent this out directly to each of them. We have followed up with a reminder to sort of complete the consultation. It goes out on the council's consultation portal. I mean, it is difficult to get them to engage. I mean, generally we find where there are things that they are concerned about, they will come back and make comment about. So I'm not suggesting they're completely happy with everything, but I think there is an element of where they do feel there is real concern, they do come back and say so.
Are we just saying the fact that they have not made any comment is a sign of consent that they agree with the new policy proposal?
I think it would probably be unfair for me to say that they consent to it, but again, I think if they were really unhappy with it, I'm sure they would have made comment. So we have sent letters directly to each of the licence holders. We know who they are. We know where their addresses are. So we've tried all we can to get comment from them.
I think we need to do more to get them involved in this particular policy that we're going to be taking through. I think that's the point I'm trying to make. Just by not replying is not good enough. Something needs to be done. Thank you.
Okay, this rose quite a bit of emotion last time we discussed this, so I couldn't see who come first, but Councillor Kent, please, and then Councillor Alf.
Thank you, Chair. On page 10, the last point that Michelle Cunningham made about the ice cream vans by Mayflower, the Mayflower Road School, Trafford 100. We've not responded to that in there specifically. Is that if that's a problem with parking and like the fact that the ice cream van is there, is that something that we would forward on to other departments to sort of take a look at if she's raising it as a concern?
Yeah,
I mean, rather than it just sort of get lost in this report and maybe nothing come of it.
Absolutely, I didn't think it was relevant to the policy in relation to looking at an individual complaint. I mean, certainly this will be picked up with us. Traditionally, we don't often see very many of the ice cream traders around, this time of year. But a service request has been raised in relation to this, and it will be followed up, by the team. We do link in with parking and other departments. So where there's complaints about street traders parking on double yellow lines and things like that, we do liaise with parking, etc., to try and get the resolve. But that will be picked up this year, and we'll obviously monitor that and deal with that if it requires that.
Okay, Councillor Ralph.
Thank you. You just picked up on what I was going to say. No, that's fine. And thank you for the answer on that. The other thing I'd like to ask is, obviously, this isn't just about ice cream traders. This is about all types of traders, and it's about the enforcement of it. So if a resident calls in that they feel they have an illegal trader, say in the middle of the quarantine centre, what action is able to be taken on that day?
I mean, with all of these, with licensing, we generally try to take what we call a graduated enforcement approach. So, if it's the first time we've had engagement with a trader that hasn't got a licence, we'll go along, we educate them on the fact that they need to have a licence. We would encourage them to apply for a licence if it was in the sort of location that we thought was, there's a potential for a licence to be obtained. If it was parked on a zigzags on a zebra crossing, we would say, look, where you're parked, there's no way you're going to get street trading, you need to move on. The difficulty we have is that the enforcement power for this is to prosecute them. So, we can't issue them with a fixed penalty notice, we can't move them on. All we can do is to actually prosecute them. So if they don't engage with us, if they don't make the application to licence, then enforcement action would be the consideration of a prosecution. We have prosecuted a street trader a year or two ago that persistently kept turning up and didn't apply for licences and was a general problem. And we got a successful prosecution at the courts as a result of that. So, so we like to try and take a progressive enforcement approach. So we'll engage with them, educate them, try and get them licensed, and if not, move them on or take them on. Generally, people will either apply for the licence or will move on and say, okay, I didn't realise I needed a licence, and they'll find somewhere else.
Councillor Ralph.
So when we talk about licensing, I guess things like the charity collections come under different things. When you get at the air ambulance turn up, that's covered under something completely different. And then would busking and all that come under something different again?
Yeah, so charity collections are dealt with under the Charities Act, and it's only cash collections in the street that require a licence. The direct debit collectors don't require a licence, and they don't come under street trading. Buskers, again, don't come under street trading unless they're particularly selling, CDs, or you still get CDs these days, but as a product in relation to the busking. And it's unlikely that they'll come under the Licensing Act as well. So generally, they're fairly unregulated by any sort of licensing regime.
Any more questions? Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, the last time we debated this, I had concerns about the draft policy, and I still have. I've got a number of questions. If I recall, I thought we asked officers to go away and report back in terms of what other local authorities do particularly in relation to the DBS checks. I'm always interested in what our peers do. It gives me a flavour of whether this is best practice or not. And I don't know whether you've been able to find that out. What do our nearest neighbours or local authorities do?
Yeah, I mean, looking locally, there aren't any sort of local other licensing or local authorities that have got this sort of similar test at the moment in relation to sort of the DBS check. Some of them are considering it, but there's no more than a consideration really around that. Not every local authority has a street trading consent scheme. So, if you start looking into London and other places like that, which operate under a different legislation, they do some different things. But locally, there isn't really any other local authority that is considering this or has got this in place. There are a couple that are considering it, but as of yet, there's nothing else that's in place, certainly within Essex, that I could find.
Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, since we had our last meeting, all local authorities publish their licensing policy, and I've been looking mainly at other unitary authorities, and none of them come close to this. I mean, our policy, if you take out the DBS element, just what we're proposing is the top end, really, of what other councils do in terms of regulating street trading. Some really do nothing at all, other than just, request that somebody get consent from the council. I still think it's unnecessary. When I'm being asked to agree something like this, I always, need to be sure we're taking a proportionate response. And I just haven't seen any evidence that this is necessary, that it's proportionate. And it just smacks to me of one thing that people can't say. And I'm not criticising officers. I want to be clear here. I'm grateful that they bring us these things to debate. But one thing people can't stand in this country is this creeping health and safety gone mad. And health and safety gone mad is where someone perceives a risk that doesn't really exist, or there's no evidence of a risk, and says, let's make rules. And this is what this is to me. It's not good practice. There's no government guidance that says we should do it. There's no local evidence to suggest it's necessary. We don't ask people who we let commercial units to, like news agents, to do this. We don't ask our housing council tenants who live near schools to undergo a DBS check. So it's not consistent with what we do as an authority. And I think we're taking a regulatory process and trying to basically manipulate it to go too far. So it is, for me, as I say, a step too far. There's no evidence to support that is necessary. I don't like the fact there's no appeal against it. If we make a decision that somebody doesn't like in respect to an alcohol licence or a taxi licence, they have a right of appeal, they have a right to come before a subcommittee. I don't like the fact that in it we're trying to, I know it's not an express condition, but we're trying to encourage people selling food, for example, to have healthy options. That I think has no place in this policy. I don't think that we should try and sort of impose that on people. Not because I'm not somebody who takes this view that the state or that public authority should never encourage people to. I just don't think it has any place in the licensing regime for us to be telling street traders, really, you should be selling salads. And in terms of the exploitation, again, can't support that. I think it has no place in this process. I don't want to do down that, but I think asking people who want to sell kebabs to lorry drivers or that to undergo exploitation training, I'd expect it in Haringey or in Hackney or Liverpool or somewhere like that, not in a sort of conservative authority. So for me, respectfully, I wouldn't support the policy as it is or the recommendation. I think this is a process which should regulate the proliferation of street vendors, and it goes too far as I'm concerned, without any evidence base. So on that basis, I wouldn't support the policy as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maley. Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. It will come as no surprise that I supported Councillor Maley last time this came before us, and I completely echo everything he just said. I think it is mission creep, if you will. We are licensing an activity to sell things to the public. I mean, this is going way too far into, what kind of personality that should be, what sort of training they should have, and to the extent of what sort of food that they should sell is just nonsense. I think that's crazy. So I do support Councillor Maley on that. One thing I would like to ask separately to that, and it does relate back to the ice cream bans and to Councillor Kent's earlier point, is that we do have the ability to prohibit trade in certain roads. Is there a barrier to prohibiting trade on roads directly outside schools within a certain radius, say 500 metres away from a school in a particular road? Do we have that sort of latitude to do that, or are we limited to the roads we already nominated on Appendix 1?
No, I mean, effectively, the policy, your prohibited streets can be whatever you feel, that is needed. I mean, generally, the ones that are prohibited streets are there because of sort of safety issues predominantly. I'm not suggesting that so many metres from a school, etc., couldn't necessarily be something that you prohibit. It may be that rather than make the whole street prohibited street, that as part of the policy you could say that that within so many metres of a school, we'd have to give a little bit of thought around that. But that could certainly be looked at if that's felt that is something that ought to be considered.
Yeah, I just feel that we spend a lot of time trying to get parents to not park outside of schools, and we spend a lot of time to try and encourage the reduction in fast food places near schools. It just seems daft that we can allow an ice cream van or a burger van, I suppose, to pitch up outside of school and do exactly that, whilst we're trying to encourage things to be different. So I think it's something we should be looking at. Thank you.
Councillor Ralph.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say, not that I'm disappointed, I understand my colleagues' points about the creeping controls going on. But for me, coming from somewhere that helps out a community park, where I championed that everyone should be DBS checked who work in there, because they've got access with children. For an ice cream salesperson or something like that, a vendor, I want our people to be safe. And I think having a clear DBS, it's okay, they're not updated automatically, and I'd love that rolling update if it was physically possible, because there's a delay that someone could be convicted. But I'd want to know that the street vendor that my daughter went to wasn't a convicted sex offender. And I know you say there's no evidence to prove that, but until somebody gets caught, we don't know that that's not out there. And I think it's a good thing that Thurrock Council is championing, that we have a safeguarding procedure that does require people to go undergo those checks. Yes, I'm not saying I understand your feelings about that creep and control, but that's where I sit on that.
Any more questions? Councillor Shook.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, I was looking at the makeup of the street traders. It would be nice if we can have the list. I mean, of the that make up the street traders. Do you understand what I'm saying? The list of it. I mean, when you talk about street traders, who are the street traders?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly provide. I mean, the types of street traders, or and I mean, for Thurrock, predominantly you have a large number of ice cream traders that move around the borough, predominantly through the summer period, and you'll have a number of fixed locations that are traditionally selling burgers, pizzas, kebabs. I think we've got some seafood stalls and bits and pieces like that. So that's the types. I mean, we can provide a list of the traders and and their locations and what they sell. I think actually that should be available online. If people want to see the street trading licences we issue, you can go online and see that how many licences or who we've issued licences to, etc. So, but yeah, I mean, if members want that, we can provide that information.
One more question is when you're talking about the training, the exploitation training, have people come forward for that training?
I think with the exploitation training, that's really about giving, and it's about, we do it for the taxi drivers, and it's about giving the taxi drivers the tools to recognise signs of potential child exploitation. That's sexual exploitation as well as criminal exploitation, and really know what to do if they see these sort of signs. So it's about reporting that to the relevant authorities, and I can honestly say that there has been a couple, or at least one, I think possibly two occasions where through taxi drivers reports have come in through to us and they've led to investigations. They're rolling that out through again through the hotel trades and bits and pieces, and I think from a community safety point of view, it's trying to get any business that is engaging predominantly around young people, that see young people on a regular basis, to sort of say if they see some of the signs of it, young people with large amounts of cash that adults are coming to buy and burgers, and it all looks a little bit strange potentially. I think that's the idea of the CSE training. I think it just creates that awareness, and I think Thurrock is not unique. We do have issues of CSE in and around that affects residents of this borough and young people of this borough. So I think that's the reason why they were asking that we extend it out to the areas of licensing that are more likely to come into contact with the young people, and that's why we predominantly said around the late night refreshment ones, the ones that operate after 11 p.m, and the ones that are predominantly engaging around younger people, the ice cream vans.
Everyone said what they want to say? Councillor Main.
I'd be concerned if there are many late night vendors after 11 p.m. selling food to children. I'd love to know why they're doing that. I mean, just on that point, I mean, we know why it's a good idea for taxi drivers to be involved in exploitation training, because there's some very high-profile cases where I won't go into detail, but we know that, for example, there is a link between sexual crime and private hire vehicles. That's why it's regulated. Hotels are increasingly being used for asylum seekers. It's common sense that you would look for the signs of exploitation. But I just find it very... someone selling refreshment from a stall should look for the signs of exploitation. To make it a condition, I've got no problem asking people whether they would engage in it voluntarily. But I just find it an intrusion to go to the lengths where you make it a condition, and that you make it a condition to undergo, a DBS check. I'm all for taking preventative measures if there's evidence, but just to say, let's do it because it will make the public more safe. You have to have some evidence, otherwise we just go making rules all the time. And as I say, it just seems absurd to me that you could have a street trader who's required to undergo a DBS check, but just behind him there might be a newsagent renting a council shop in which children go daily, yet he's rented that shop and he's allowed to carry on his business without any kind of stipulation like this at all. And that's why I think if you're going to start making these policies and you want to start pushing them out to the various people we have control over, it needs to come from the very top, and you need to say we're going to have a policy, we're going to embed that across all our departments so that it's consistent. Just taking the licensing approach and having these kind of rules when another department might be responsible for, as I say, leasing a shop to a newsagent or someone, but we don't have those rules. It just creates an inconsistent approach for me, and I think it is, as Graham hit the nail on the head, it's just that creeping interference, I think, without any evidence that it's necessary, that it's proportionate. And, of course, it's an added cost. Councillor Olenarji pointed out when we were looking at fees and charges at the last meeting, we have to consider the impact on businesses, and there is a cost to having to produce a DBS check. It's one more expense on people who are trying to run a business. So, for me, I know it's well-meaning, I know it's well-intended, but I just don't see the justification for it, and I can't support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Maney. Anyone else?
No.
Thank you for your contributions. I'll put mine in now. First of all, Paul, can you tell me how many crimes involving child exploitation have been occurred with these traders that we're trying to licence?
I have got no data around that. I mean, it's not something I would readily know.
Is there a pressing need?
I think what I can say is I am aware of a couple of occasions where there's been some serious allegations in relation to street traders within the borough over the number of years I've been involved with that.
How many years?
Well, I've been at the authority 12 years now, and I've been involved with licensing of street trading for about 4 or 5 years now. And I know of a number of, say, at least 2 incidences where traders have been involved in some serious, or there's been investigation into serious criminal activity. I don't know the outcomes of that because I'm not privy to that information. But, I can say that I'm not saying that they've definitely got convictions out there. And I can't say, in relation to what that criminal activity is in relation to. But, I think because of the nature of the activity, is slightly less regulated. It's more transigent. There's less sort of fixed costs and assets associated with the business. They open and close relatively quickly. They move on relatively quickly. There's less commitment to things than necessarily taking on a shop where you're ready for the business rates and other bits and pieces. I'm not saying that there is an absolute plethora of issues out there that we're trying to resolve from this. So it's just an opportunity to be able to try and safeguard, some of the more vulnerable members of society within the borough by just checking out who we're actually giving consent to, because we have the ability and the option to be able to do that.
And what about the lack of right of appeal? Everyone else taxi drivers. Get that right.
I mean, that's it's the legislation. It's the way the legislation works. You know, a consent scheme, and the consent scheme was what was brought into the borough. You know, when it was set up a number of years ago. I wasn't involved in the initial implementation of the scheme. As a consent scheme, there is no right of appeal to that. It would need a legislation change for consents to change that. If you implemented a licence scheme, then there is an appeal against a licence scheme. There is a unique difference between the two.
I'm a little puzzled. I have a lot of respect for Michelle Cunningman and her opinions, and I was just surprised to see we're talking about ice cream vans parking in streets outside schools, which, whatever the risks are, the risks of children being knocked over running to and from an ice cream van are much higher, and I don't think they should be there, full stop. So I think we can take it as read that we'd like some action, keep traders of whatever away from schools while the children are coming out. They can ply their trade elsewhere, further down the road, but not outside schools. I think we'd be in agreement with that, would we? Okay. Finally, I've got the BVI report ringing in my ears, plus the meetings with and training we've had from the Essex Council officers about good value and good reports. What we have here is a consultation which drew no replies. The only except a council officer, not the people concerned. And that's unsatisfactory, and it is certainly unsatisfactory to continue with anything along the lines that has been proposed as a recommendation until we get a proper consultation. Now, whatever, this report is totally unsatisfactory and unfit for purpose. So we'll go back to first principles and we'll have another consultation. I would recommend that we abandon whatever plans you have to take effect on the 1st of April 2023, because it is not being done properly. So you'll have to try again and make sure you do get some replies, even if you have to go around to their houses and bang on their doors. Please, Paul.
I mean, I think I would need to take some advice as to what constitutes, proper consultation. I appreciate that there is, very little response to that. I'm not sure whether going around and knocking on the doors of all of the street traders would be considered an appropriate or effective consultation. I would need to take some advice on that. I don't know what the recommendation of the committee will be, but I think, we can certainly look at the consultation process. I'm not aware, other than, the use of social media, etc., but I'm not sure we're actually targeting the group of people we're trying to get the response from. But
there's only 30 of them. You can...
Yeah, and not all of them live within the borough of Thurrock, so that's the complications I've got with
But we know where they trade, don't we?
We do know where that they trade, yeah. But
we can go down. Somebody can go down there, and from the council.
I'd like to take some advice on that from sort of more senior management, if that's okay.
Okay, but nothing goes forward until this happens, and then we'll discuss it again. So I think we've got some comments. So Councillor, so it'll be Councillor Ralph, then Councillor Snell, then Councillor Maney, please. Thank you.
Chair, I totally agree. I think we can't go forward until we've had a consultation that has been replied to. A meaningful consultation. We've had this before in health and wellbeing, and unfortunately it did mean that we engaged with the CVS to go around and door knock to get the replies that we needed to get the information. We do know, as say, we know when they trade, it could be that you do need to literally boots on the ground and go and talk to them for it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. I think on the consultation side, it is difficult. We've had many consultations in Thurrock, and with the greatest respect, it is very difficult to get people to participate in consultations at the best of times. And seriously, I don't like really the idea of council officers going around banging on people's doors or their business premises, to be perfectly honest. But I was interested in the response to the reason why there's no appeal, and that is because it's what the legislation says. And what I will suggest is that that's what we do. We do the legislation. All the stuff we've bolted onto it, we don't really need to do that. The legislation is I take it very specific what we should be doing. Well, let's do that. There's been no response to a consultation, so we can't really implement any of the other stuff, the bolted on stuff. But we can at least implement what the legislation says we need to do. And I think that's as far as we need to go, personally. Thank you.
Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth noting overall that the draft policy is a good one. We're talking about a few select parts of it. It's only a suggestion from me, but I wonder if we can agree it. We just remove that. We say, we removed the bit about public health, removed the bit about exploitation, and removed the bit about DPS. Agree everything else. We can look at these in more depth and consult on those points specifically at a later stage. And if needs be, we can always amend it. I can't see a problem with that. But 90% of what is in there is fine. It's just these few contentious bits which seem to go against the grain for this kind of thing. So I wonder if we could just remove those passages, agree it, so we have got some form of regulation, and just look at these at a later date at our leisure.
Anyone else? Councillor Chuckman.
Chair, I think I agree totally for more consultation. Yeah, thanks.
I agree with what you have said about the consultation, and also what Councillor Chukwu said. Yeah. Consultation is very important. I think the license holders need to know. They need to make an input into the policy to see what they see about it. I think it's very important we consult them. So I'm in support of the policy being suspended at the moment until we carry out proper consultations. Thank you.
Thank you. I take on board the very good points that have been made by Councillor Snell and Councillor Maney. However, the elephant in the room is that we don't have any input from any consultation from the people who are going to be affected by it. Yes. So we will have to go for another consultation and make sure we get the answers. As for talking to people, I do that. I've been doing that for 40, 50 years. When I've been selling shoes, packaging, insurance, and it's what I'm doing now as a pollster. I ask people, I need your opinion. It's not that difficult. You can learn it in a day. So I'm not going to take that as an excuse. So we need a more meaningful consultation with more participation from the people who are going to be affected by it. Then we start discussing about what we can keep and throw out in our particular policy. And that's what I would be prepared to move.
Chair, can I just make a comment that's probably in response to sort of Councillor Maney's suggestion around just removing the elements that are effectively the new parts to the policy. I think the original report said that the policy was outdated. It reflected the process and procedures that were there under the food team. It's moved across to the licensing team. So that was the main reason that the policy was revised. And then we've added these extra elements in to try and enhance the policy effectively. I think to not push this policy through will then bring us back right to the old policy that is outdated, that references things that don't exist and references processes that don't exist anymore. So I think the suggestion, if you're unhappy with the lack of consultation response in relation to those key areas that we're introducing into the policy, it would be probably sensible to, if agreeable with everyone, to remove those parts from the policy and agree the remainder of the policy, just so that we've got a policy that is more fit for purpose to continue doing what we're doing, and then we can go out to more consultation. We can come back to this committee again around those three key elements. That's the CSE training, the introduction of DBS and fitness checks of the applicant, and the last one's just escaped me. But so the three key elements that we spoke about.
We agreed that there would be a consultation. We haven't had one person come back. We need to get the message out that these things are happening, and we need their input. Then we can start listening to their feedback, and that will give us another point of view, which, after all, they're the ones who are going to be affected by it, whether the items that you want to keep or take out is going to be a worthwhile action. So I would say I'm unhappy that we've had no reply. We need an answer, some answers from the people who are going to be affected. Councillor Maney.
Very quickly, Chair, because obviously I don't want to string this out, but I understand what you're saying, but as a licensing member, I've taken on board what the licensing officer said. Bear in mind how infrequently we have committees. We've just really heard that a lot of these standard conditions, which would protect the public, won't be in place as such until we agree this. And most of the stuff in here, I don't really want to hear street traders' views on it, because, I mean, how can you say, it's this, you will remove rubbish, you will keep your unit in an acceptable condition. If everybody comes back and says, no, we want to throw rubbish in the street, we wouldn't say, oh, okay, the majority. Most of the stuff in here, their views are irrelevant. They're good practice, and we should. It's a bit like asking someone, "Do you mind if we fine you for littering?" If they say yes, well, tough. Most of the stuff in here is right. It's about displaying price lists. It's about complying with food hygiene. It's about keeping your trading unit in good and safe condition, removing your rubbish, and not, causing antisocial behaviour. Really, the traders' views on that are irrelevant, because even if they said, we don't like that, surely we wouldn't be saying, oh, OK, we'll take that bit out. So I think what the licensing officer is telling us is valid. Whilst we deliberate on this, we haven't got those standard bits in place that we can point to, and I think that creates a gap. So as much as I'm, on the one hand, saying there's bits in here I can't agree, equally I'm uncomfortable that we have nothing in place. It could be another 6 months before we have a meeting, and all of that time there's a loophole in some of our regulations. So I would again, you can't make people respond. I mean, we've heard that you've written directly to the traders. If we just put this on the internet and expected them to find it, I'd be saying, yeah, that's. But sort of writing to them directly and saying, this consultation's happening, we want your views. I can't really see there's a great deal more you can do. We do have to think what best use of officers' time. And like Councillor Snell, I'd be a bit concerned about physically going around to these people when I know how small the team is and I know what other pressures there are on it. But I do agree, if you wanted to go and have another consultation, that's a valid point. But I'm more concerned at the lack of protections which are in place in the meantime, bearing in mind how infrequently we meet. So it can't all be contentious, this policy, and some of it, as I say, it wouldn't matter what people's views are on it, because it's standard stuff that is there to protect and regulate the trade. So I would again just suggest perhaps we can reconsider taking out those contentious bits and agreeing the policy as it is, because this is like you would find in most other local authorities. It is what the law expects us to do as a licensing authority. We're not going above and beyond what we're expected to do. We're just doing what we are expected to do, and we haven't even got that in place. If we just say no, go out to consultation, and then we'll consider it again in 6 months' time, we could be here again. We've only had 1 or 2 replies. What will we do then? Go out for another consultation? And all the time there's a lack of policy in place to protect the public and all it. So I would again just urge that we adopt the policy without those contentious bits. So there are some basic protections and policies to point to in place. That's what I would move.
For the record, would you just confirm the contentious bits?
Thank you, Chair. I think I already did earlier. The contentious bits were the bit relating to public health, basically not requiring that people provide healthy alternatives. The exploitation training, I think, is unnecessary, and the DBS requirement for a DBS check. All of those three seem to go completely against the grain of in terms of what other local authorities do. The rest is standard. They do that. These are what I would say are the contentious bits.
Okay. Councillor Chipwood.
Thanks, Chair. Honestly, I support DBS check, because you are dealing with the traders because you don't know their backgrounds. Their backgrounds needs to be checked. That's where I stand.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Ralph.
Yeah, just sitting there thinking about what the other councillors have said. I take on board your point about you could have an ice cream stall and behind him we've got another shop that's selling sweets to kids. I take that on board. For me, I agree the exploitation training probably isn't necessary. I don't really see where that fits in, and I certainly don't think the healthy option stuff really has a place in this policy at all. But for me, the DBS check is something that I really do want to keep in this. Could we move it forward? How does that affect the current policy? Obviously, the current policy would still hold and still be validated.
I mean, the current policy will still hold and will still be validated. However, as I say, that policy is out of date, and there are lots of references and things in there that reflect the process and the conditions and everything that were attached when it was part of the food team. So I think the suggestion of removing those three key elements, which are really the three elements that are new to the policy, the others are just refreshed to reflect the different process changes with the different teams and the different way that the actual applications are handled and the conditions are attached. So, the policy, we still have a policy. It is old, it's outdated, and it's desperately needed to be revised. And I think to roll back to that, it still legally stands, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's not fit for purpose, but it definitely needs some sort of urgent refreshing to it, to take this policy forward, which has got that refreshment to it, without the new bits that have been introduced, would, in my view, be a better way to do it, to ensure that moving forward that actually says what we're doing properly within the current policy, and then we can come back and consider those other bits again, having gone through more rigorous consultation, and we can determine how that will look, further on.
Councillor Manning.
It is, and most, a lot of the conditions are, replications of legal requirements under the food safety legislation, under the health and safety legislation. But the idea of that is to emphasise the need to do it, yeah.
Anyone else? No, I think we should have another consultation, another consultation, and try hard to get people to come back. And instead of waiting 6 months for the next meeting, we'll wait again in a month's time.
Chairman.
Sorry, the other point, Chair, is in relation to consultation. I mean, there's probably no way we can go out and do effective consultation within a month and get the report written and back to you. I mean, we're hopeful, if you're going to do a consultation, 4 weeks, 6 weeks minimum is what we've got to do, really, to allow people ample of time to sort of consider and respond, for that level of change.
Well.
If it was to go back out for consultation, would be able to streamline the consultation so it's just focused on those points that are contentious.
Yeah, and I think what we could do is to actually refine the consultation and actually have the document to say we are considering introducing these 3 elements to our policy that was reviewed, whenever. What are your comments around these 3 key elements? So they haven't got to look through the whole policy and identify things. It will target and make it more specific about exactly what we're consulting on.
And how quickly could you be able to do that?
I mean, we can, within a few weeks, probably look to do some form of consultation. It just depends on what level of consultation, is going to be asked of us to do. As I say, if you're still requesting that it, consists of knocking on doors, etc., I'm going to have to take advice on that because I haven't got the resources in the team to be able to do that easily and quickly. And as I say, we can turn up at the burger vans, but there's a good chance it's not the actual licence holder that is behind the counter of the burger van. So, I'm happy to do further consultation. I think I just need a little bit of time to consider exactly what format that will be, and actually liaise with other colleagues that do consultation around the council to see if there are more effective ways of engaging with these stakeholders in particular.
Councillor Ananaji?
Yeah, I still believe what doing well, quite well. And I know you say you might need about 4 weeks or 6 weeks to carry out consultation. I do know there are quicker ways of doing consultation. You have a database of these street traders, and there could be telephone consultation, which you can make a telephone call. There's about 30 of them. That could be done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
I quite agree. It doesn't necessarily have to be council officers. We could subcontract somebody who does polling and they can do that for us within days. Perhaps we should look into that.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're in danger of getting a little bit bogged down with all this. I think sometimes in committee we're asked to do something that we might not necessarily want to do, but we need to do what's reasonable. And I think the officers put forward a reasonable solution to the problem we have, which is to agree the operational parts, in essence, of what's in the policy, which we all agree are fine, and take out the bits we're not keen on for a further consultation. I think that's a reasonable approach, and I think it's something as an authority we need to be wary of. That is, if something were to happen with a street trader and we do not have an up-to-date policy in place, that's on us. And I think it's unreasonable to expect that the officers operate on an out-of-date policy from going forward. So I think the offer that we've made is a reasonable one. The consultation can still go ahead and it can come back for us to debate and add in or not at a later date. But I think we should take the reasonable approach here rather than be a little bit intransigent. Thank you.
Thank you. If obviously listening to the debate, if obviously members of it aren't happy with the current recommendation, we would need a member to suggest a new recommendation. Obviously, then that can be agreed, and we can put that forward for committee to either agree or not agree. There's just I'm just thinking, see if we're kind of looking at a new recommendation, I'd need some wording that members would like to put forward.
I'm in support of new recommendations. New recommendations.
Would we be right in saying we'll accept the updated ruling policy, but we'll keep under review the public health, exploitee and the DBS checks for further review? Councillor May.
I would propose, Chair, that we remove those bits because they are essentially the new bits that we're inserting. The rest of it is really, as the licensed officer said, reminding people what their legal obligations are. So, and as Councillor Snell has said, it's about ensuring that minimum compliance, really. So My view is that we just simply remove those bits. That can be in the recommendation, and we agree it as is. We can still have the consultation, and we can always revisit the bits we've agreed at a later date and see whether they need fine-tuning. I can't see how they could, because, as I say, they are about, complying with the law, and we haven't got any, it's not for us to say who can and can't do that. And the other bits are just common sense about hygiene and being of good appearance and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So I would, personally, I would recommend that we just remove those bits, agree as is, have the consultation anyway, and then come back to it at a later stage. And we can quickly highlight with the bits in there that the passages, we just remove those in the recommendation and agree the rest of it.
Yeah, that's what I was driving at. Take out the contentious bits and pass the policy as it is without those contentious bits in, to be revisited as soon as possible, preferably before PERDA.
So what numbers are they? Sorry, they were.
That's why we're finding that, Chad. Can I ask for a point of clarification? Because I think I do think we get far too hung up with PERDA. PERDA isn't an excuse to hang the boots up. We're not allowed as an authority to say or do anything that looks like we're conferring a benefit on a political party or a candidate that's up for election. That's not an excuse for us to junk our statutory. So there's no reason at all why we can't meet and agree this, because there's nothing politically contentious about this. No one can claim a political advantage out of it. We're not making any statements in the press about it. So can we just get some clarification on that? Because I don't think PERDA would stop us in any way, shape or form continuing as a licensing committee. We're a regulatory committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor, you are correct. It doesn't necessarily stop the committee per se. What I meant was it's just obviously something to bear in mind. And obviously we are coming up to election period, but you are right. There is no reason, as a licensing committee, we're not a political committee. We are regulatory, so there is no definite reason we couldn't. I was just meant that it was obviously just to bear in mind we are coming up to that time of year, and with as officers have said, with getting a consultation in as well, it might be a bit tricky to get. It's all a bit tight. Apologies, I wasn't clear before, but yeah, I think obviously with having the time of year and having an additional consultation, it might be a bit difficult to get everything kind of wrapped up before we go into a new municipal year with new meetings.
I'm sure we could give it a good try, though. Councillor Ralph?
So we're looking at removing suitability of applicant. Is that the one? So that's the DBS section, isn't it?
Public health, exploitation training and DBS. Public health, exploitation and DBS training.
It might be worth saying that to remove from the policy all elements relating to the public health additions, the DBS additions of the need for a DBS, and the requirement for CSE training, because then that will deal with the policy in any of the appendices that are attached to it, rather than try and go through now and pick out the right bits, because we'll probably miss something here and now. But I will, with the time, can go through and strip all those bits out.
Sorry, Councillor Kent.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just saying, if we're looking at rewording the recommendations, I think what the officer said is a good idea. Do we need to put in there that we're also going out? Do you want to add that we will go out on another consultation on the additional elements? Does that need to be in the recommendation, that we're doing another consultation?
Should we do that? Okay, then. We'll go for another consultation. That's the whole point of it. The consultation, the first one we had, didn't get any replies. So, yeah, we'll put that there. Thank you, Councillor Kent. Yeah, have you got the? I thought it was you was going to write it out.
Oh no, I've got a slight amendment on, but I can confirm what wording.
Okay, so you're clear then. Okay. We'll pass this without the contentious bit, the DBS, public health, and CSE training. Are we happy? Can I show of hands? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we'll next go on to item 6, if we're okay to proceed. Settling of licensing fees. That's on page 27. And Paul, would you just like us give us a rundown, please?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this report brings back the process of setting the licensing fees, following on from the consultation. I think the key thing to say is I think it's on page 37 of the report. All of the responses received have been put into a table there. Obviously, indication of who the contributor is, the fee type that they're talking about, and the comments made by the person submitting the response. In the final column, what I've tried to do is just to give some sort of response to some of the comments in relation to that. I think based on the comments, I haven't proposed any changes to the fees that were proposed last time, so the fee schedules remain the same. I think the only thing to say really is that with licensing, the fees are set on a cost recovery basis. There's no intention there to make any profit on the fees and to subsidise other elements of the service or the council from that. If there is any profit or loss as a result of the fees that we bring in, that's included in the accounts, and the profit and loss is rolled forwards and backwards in the previous year. So if we've lost money in previous years, we can recover it in following years. If we've made money, we can pass it back or offset fees or not raise fees in following years. But the fees proposed are what's felt as necessary to ensure that we try to run cost recovery in relation to that. And the fees haven't changed for a number of years. Yeah. So I think that's all I need to say, unless there's any particular questions.
Okay, I'll just ask a question first, and I'll throw it out to everybody else. On page 43, Paul, we've got public protection licences, and they're all negative, minus 100%. What does this mean, please? Have they been taken off?
Sorry, Jerry, are you referring to at the very bottom?
Public protection licences. I must have got hold of the wrong one. This is on the back of the report. Report got here.
Sorry, yeah. Oh, sorry. The one's in red.
Yeah.
Okay, so that does relate to the street trading, and effectively there was quite a complex system around the street trading that had Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and then there was 2 Class B classes. And what we've done, so those fees in red will be removed, but they have been replaced by the just keeping one class, Class A, and one class, Class B. So that aligns with the new policy. We predominantly only issued the Class A one anyway, and the mobile one, Class B. So it's just really tidying up the scheme and making it easier to, understand and for applicants to apply for.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Snow.
It's not really a question, Chair. It's just an observation that these charges are there to basically let the authority pay its way. For far too long now, we've been losing money on these charges because, as the officer just said, we've not updated them since 2015. It was due a refresh. And this is what we need to do. We need to pay our way with these. Given that we can't make a profit, we do need to make sure the costs are recovered to cover what we're doing. So I think it's a good thing.
Councillor Ralph, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Snell about it being refreshed. I also want to know that we appreciate our taxi drivers in our borough. They are struggling at the moment. We have a decreasing population of taxi drivers in our borough and we desperately need them. Unfortunately, these fees do need to be refreshed, but I think it should be known we do appreciate them.
I think we're all grateful that the fees haven't gone up. Any more comments? Councillor Chuckwood and then Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. I was just reading out some of the feedback, and most of the complaints were about the cost of living, the cost of the high cost of petrol and other things, energy cost. You look at the charges. I think we should understand that things are actually difficult for people right now, including taxi drivers. It is quite difficult, so we have to consider about those charges.
You also have the added pressures as well from other taxi firms working in this area too. Unfortunately, as Paul has said, it's all done on a cost recovery basis. Would you just like to add anything to that, Paul?
No, and I think it is on a cost recovery basis. The fees haven't gone up since 2015. We were due to, we didn't know at the time. Obviously, during COVID, we were going to look to refresh the fees then, and they would have looked to go up then. We held off because of COVID, because drivers were not earning any money in relation to quite often in relation to their business. I appreciate it isn't a good time now. Obviously, with the cost of living crisis, everything is going up, but we need to ensure that from the council's finance point of view, we're covering the costs. We're entitled to cover the costs, and effectively it will just delay it and make the rise even bigger in future years if we don't. So,
thank you, Paul. Councillor Kent.
Thanks, Chair. Just want to say, reading through the comments from the taxi drivers, and there is a similar theme running through. Also, the theme that obviously the other taxi company that comes in and has been hasn't got, from they believe doesn't, I don't know exactly, but they believe that it doesn't operate under the same restrictions or as they do and hasn't had the same costs. I think just wondered, it does seem a big increase. Obviously, I know it's to cover costs because of added pressures in the world at the moment. Just wondered if there's any way, if we responded to everyone that took part in the consultation, how we can do maybe word something to appreciate that what they do and maybe help allay their fears on the other, legally on the other company, because there was a lot of things in there about them not having to pay and not being regulated as much and having the extra costs that they've got, and that putting them at a disadvantage. And I didn't know if that was true, and if it was true, if there was, how we could I know we can't change it, but how we could make them feel appreciated, and if it's not true, how we can help them understand that they do have these things. Does that make any sense? They do have those.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Paul, have you got anything?
we can certainly write back to each of those that have made a response. And so obviously it's been considered by this committee. We can direct them to the minutes of this committee to they can see that the comments that were made and advise them that their comments were considered, but obviously the charges are going up. I would be reluctant to comment about other licensing regimes in other areas. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with all of the comments with it that they're making anyway, and I think we could get into a old ground of battling the issue of Uber, particularly within the borough, and then the proliferation of TfL vehicles. No doubt there is, a significant amount of TfL vehicles that do operate not just in Thurrock but outside of London. However, the charge is not necessarily a cheaper place to get licensed in London now. TfL, their charges have gone up. What they're required to do to obtain a licence has gone up. The national standards have helped drive that. So I think it's, I wouldn't really want to make much comment around that.
Okay, any more comments?
Sure. I just want to find out if you do have any comparison of what our licensing fees are compared to other local authorities.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. You can compare. I wouldn't say we're the cheapest in the in the local area, or definitely the most expensive in the local area. It all depends. If you look at somewhere like Uttersford Council that issue thousands of vehicle licences because they've got Stansted Airport, the cost of providing the same system as we provide is spread over a much larger number of vehicles, so potentially their cost comes down. So it's hard, although you can compare the exact figures, what makes up those figures behind it isn't necessarily comparable. What I can say is the cost of our licences and what it costs us to provide that service. And I'd like to be better staffed than we are. I'd like to have more resources than we've got. But for what we do, we provide the service that we provide. It is a cost recovery service.
So what do we really take into consideration to set this?
I mean, it's what it costs us, and the information that's provided there shows, where our expenditure goes and where our income comes from. As I say, benchmarking, it gives you an idea of whether you're roughly in the right area, because if we were charging £1,000 and everybody else in the country was charging £100, we might ask the question why. But you shouldn't set your fees just based on benchmarking. What do other councils do? Because you should set it legally on what does it cost you to provide the service, what does it cost you to process an application, which hopefully these do.
Yes, sorry. I think we should take into consideration this consultation, this commentary being made here about the impact, the hardship that people, residents are currently going through should be taken into consideration when we are setting up this kind of fees as well. It's something we should look into.
Yeah, and I think members have obviously hopefully considered that tonight. Some of the comments and members have spoken to say that they appreciate the work that taxi drivers do, and the pressures that are upon them. And I don't think anyone's sitting here saying that it's not a rise. It's not going to be it's going to be comfortable with everybody. But what we're saying from an officer's point of view is that our role is to ensure that we are cost recovery effectively, and that's the reason why we are. The fees haven't gone up for a number of years now, they do need to rise.
Okay, I'm going to call it to an end. The recommendations to consider the consultation response received and agree the proposed fees and charges as set out in Appendix 3 for the 2023 to 2024 financial year. Are we all in agreement? No. Agreed. Okay, thank you. We'll now pass on to our agenda item 7, and this is to do the taxi licensing policy language proficiency update. And once again, Paul, would you like to present?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, you'll be aware that obviously we brought the revised taxi policy in that came into effect on the 1st of October 2022. As part of that implementation, obviously we've been educating and getting all the drivers to meet the requirements within that policy. One of the newer requirements was to demonstrate some language proficiency to ensure that they had a good grasp of language so they could communicate with customers, etc. Within the policy, we basically said that if you've got a recognised qualification within the UK, or not within the UK, but that has been taught in English, and the subject didn't have to be English. It could have been, woodwork or sport or something like that. As long as the subject was taught in an English language, as long as you've got a formal qualification in that, then that would be acceptable to prove that you've got a reasonable understanding of English. There was an alternative there, and the alternative qualification effectively is one of those qualifications that if you're applying for citizenship, that you have to prove your level of language within that citizency test. So anyone that wasn't necessarily educated in this country, had the option if they'd applied for citizenship to be able to demonstrate that. What's happened is that lots of drivers have said, I haven't got my certificates from back in the year 30, 40, 50 years ago. There are lots that have. but there are a certain element of drivers that haven't been able to access, haven't been in any form of sort of education for a number of years, and for whatever reason they haven't got the certification anymore. There is the ability to apply for the certification, but what's become apparent is it's taking a long time to get that certification, and it's becoming very costly, you know, £50 plus to obtain a replacement certificate. So the suggestion is that we've been able to develop a very short assessment that will be part of the knowledge test, or an additional test that they can come along and sit, that will assess their English comprehension effectively. So anyone that can't provide a certificate, rather than having to go to the expense and the time of trying to obtain a certificate, could come sit online for 10-15 minutes and just complete a short assessment so that we can assess their sort of comprehension around English. And really the proposal is just to add that, with the agreement of the committee, as one of the acceptable ways of demonstrating English proficiency. Thank you, Chair.
Well, Councillor Largy.
Thank you very much. I understand the requirement to have English proficiency as a requirement to hold a license. But my point is, where do we place someone, a resident, who has English as his first language and has lived in this country throughout his life, but is unable to provide any certificate or any document? Does this person still have to go through the comprehension when we do know that this person is an English person and he has been speaking English throughout his life?
I mean, effectively, yes. You know, because of the main reason, obviously, is around the sort of discrimination laws. We can't necessarily discriminate, you know, and set one rule for one and a different rule for another in relation to that. So, you know, the fair approach is that, you know, everybody is given the same ability to be able to prove their English comprehension. And hopefully, you know, this short assessment will be a very simple, cost-free way to them to be able to demonstrate it if they're not able to provide some sort of qualification. Most people, when they look hard enough, you know, can find something that they can demonstrate their English comprehension with. But this would just give those drivers that haven't been able to demonstrate that the ability to do something that free of charge without having to go off and pay £50, £100 and take 12 weeks to get that back. What I will say is any driver that has renewed with us that hasn't been able to meet that requirement, we've allowed to renew pending a decision tonight, and they've all agreed that if that's the case, I say they all, there's a handful of them, they're quite happy to come and sit a short test. We can attach that as part of the knowledge test, so any new drivers coming through that haven't got the certification, when they come in to do the knowledge test, can sit that as part of the knowledge test, so it will save them time around that.
Yes. I find it very difficult to see someone who have English as his mother tongue and has been speaking English and now have to sit for a comprehension for 2 hours to be able to ascertain his knowledge of English. It doesn't make sense. I can understand someone who has English as a second language. And moreover, there are some people who may have AQA certificate or GCSE. They only just study this for the grammar to be able to get through. But they can't really communicate with someone who has got English as his first language. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think that method of assessment is really ideal for. There should be an alternative method of doing that. Either an exemption for someone who has English as his first language. I don't see that as a discrimination. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the test, the assessment would only take about 10 minutes, not 2 hours. So I think just to clarify that point.
Well, I leave it for anyone else who wants to make a contribution to it, but for me, it doesn't really go well because the point I've made. Anyways, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Margie. Anyone else would like to make any comments? Councillor Balmini, then Councillor Ralph.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I agree with what Councillor Nargi is saying. It does seem a bit absurd, and I just wanted to probe this suggestion, Paul, that you said you can't legally differentiate. Is that legal advice that we've had, or just your understanding? Because I'm quite sure I can think of other. For example, if somebody is applying for benefits or public assistance, there will be people who clearly, because of their name or the way they look, will be asked to prove that they're eligible for public funds by way of their immigration status, and the DW people just never ask because it's obvious. So I'm not sure. I'm not. It's in my personal opinion, I'm not sure that is an accurate reflection of the law that you can't. I mean, just sometimes it'll be obvious that you'll have to ask some people to provide evidence which you wouldn't of other people. So I just wanted to get a bit more advice from you on that.
Certainly, my understanding that with the discrimination laws that we have to treat everybody in the same way. I think the report has been through implication through equality and diversity, and they've not picked up in relation to anything in relation to that. I think the other thing is for looking at officers that have to make sort of judgments. I think a system where it's not subjective, benefits in as much as it doesn't open up people to allegations of discrimination. And I use the situation where accents and things. People, if you're talking to someone, you might not be able to understand someone potentially with a particular style of accent, but it doesn't mean their English isn't good. It's just the person that's making that assessment struggles with that particular accent type. So I think this it seems a way of making sure that everyone has the same opportunity. Certainly with things like the right to work checks, when looking at employment and around taxi drivers, whether it's a white British male that's born in this country with a birth certificate in this country, has never left this country, they still have to provide their passport to prove their right to work. We can't look at them and say, well, you don't need to do that. And I think that's the whole point, is the system that we've got looks at everybody in the same way and offers the same opportunity regardless of who they are and what sort of ethnic background that they actually come from.
Councillor Ralph?
Yeah, it's picked up on the same thing that's been picked up all the way through. I mean, I'm sort of confused.
We all picked up on that.
Yeah, I am confused when it comes to, say, a teenager who leaves school without any qualifications because they leave early because they wasn't getting on to school, would force to go through this test. I think that's really, really bizarre. And I know that's done because obviously we've got to be open and including everybody. But I mean, I'm aware that there's a Formula 1 driver that doesn't have GCSEs or any qualifications, and he would have to come and sit that test to prove that he could be a taxi driver in Thurrock. I just find it very, very strange the way that this is set out, and I'd be worried that if someone who could find the only job they're good at is driving, and they say, oh, you've got to sit a test to speak English, I just think it's just quite strange.
And I think any new driver that comes to be a taxi driver has to come and sit the knowledge test anyway. This will be part of the knowledge test. It will be an element of the knowledge test. If they've got the certification, that will be just one element they don't have to sit. It will be another 10 minutes on the test that they would just have to sit and answer a number of questions. And they're both written questions and oral questions. So, there's some spoken questions and you select the right answer as a result of that, to try and assess their understanding of English as a spoken word, as well as, being able to read English.
Next is Councillor Snell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the other comments regarding English language speakers that are obviously English language speakers. However, there are going to be applicants that are not very good at English for whatever reason, And I think that a basic comprehension test is the right way to go. I have had experience of speaking to cab drivers in the city, and frankly didn't have a clue what I was saying, one of them in particular. My question is who has designed this test? Is it something we've done in-house, or is it something we've bought in from somewhere else? There must be some metric that says, actually, this is a good thing, and at the end of the test, you will have a pretty good idea of where that comprehension level is.
Yeah, it's been developed in-house and in line with our knowledge test system provider. The in-house person that has developed this is qualified in, she's not an English speaker, but teaching English as a second language and the assessment around that. So it's not me sitting down and just making it up. It is by somebody that is competent and qualified to do this. We're lucky that we've got somebody in-house to do that. So we can confirm that.
And can you give me an idea of what kind of level this assesses to? I mean, if someone gets through that test, I mean, are we talking really basic language or a little bit better than that? Where does it assess to?
I mean, when you look at the tests that they sit alongside the sort of citizenship test, there's various grades of that. This is the lower end of the scale, but we're only really requiring our drivers to be able to understand what's been asked of them, and really to be able to understand roughly what we're sending to them, and to be able to communicate with their passengers effectively. If they've got a question around the sort of the money side of things, and actually if there's an emergency, if they break down on the motorway, to effectively communicate with somebody to get out of the car and stand safely. So, we're not asking a really high level of this, but it's not the absolute bottom basic level. It's somewhere the lower end of it, in the middle.
And can I assume that if they've got no evidence, and this is the only way of proving their competence, if they fail that, they've got to come back and do that again? Is that correct?
I would be very surprised if anybody failed that fitted into the category of English born, bred, English speaking as their first language. I'd be very surprised if anyone would actually fail that. And they're not technical questions; they're just questions designed to understand that you understand what's being asked of you, sort of thing. So you don't need any knowledge to be able to answer the question. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to ask about, as I work with people with special needs every day, and I know a lot of them, you can have a conversation or part of a conversation, but if you put it into a test scenario, they can't do it. They freeze and they can't do anything. So have we got something in place for people that the fact that it's a test and I've got to pass this, or people that if it is on the computer I might not be that confident? Is there support that is available to help them through that part and the psychological part? Because I might be fine talking in a one-to-one basis with their customer in the back of the car, but going through a test because it's official, and that might... So have we got things in place to help people that struggle under those circumstances?
Yeah, certainly. Things like with the knowledge test anyway, we do offer additional support to people that have special educational needs, for instance. So yeah, there are things we can do to assist them with that. Be that give them extra time for the test. In some cases, we actually will read the test to them. So, as an example of ways that we try and meet the needs of everybody that's taking the test.
Sorry, can I just come back on one point? You said for those with special needs, but there could be people out there that are not actually diagnosed with special needs, but still have that anxiety about doing a test. So would that, if you could, I don't know, would that support be automatically offered to people that you feel might need it by looking at them when they come into...
Yeah, and all the tests now are done on a one-to-one basis. We predominantly try to do those remotely over Teams, but we will allow people to come into the office and deal with that. It's part of the conversation that the officer that's administering the test or supervising the test will have, that if they feel that's if somebody communicates to them that there's an issue that they've got that they need assistance with, or if they feel that there is an issue here, why are they struggling with that, they're not understanding it properly for whatever reason, they'll have a conversation with them and see whether there's any additional support that we can give. At the end of the day, we do. It's a very difficult one in as much as you can't just rely on someone walking through the door and saying, "Oh, I have dyslexia, so I need extra time," because they just might potentially be saying that to get extra time on a test that is a timed test. So we have to put some checks and balances in place. But yeah, we try and do all we can to try and assist people where we can with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to add on to what Councillor Kent has said about alternative method of assessment quite well. There are some people, no matter what you do, they find it very difficult to do a test, no matter even the amount of support you provide for them. We should have possibly an alternative method of assessment where we can be able to judge the candidate's proficiency in English language, either during the interview process, because you'll be able to communicate with them, and you should be able to find out whether they do have the necessary requirements to be able to communicate. So my point is, I think we should be looking at other alternatives rather than going through the process of getting some kind of academic or going through exam boards to qualify you to be able to be approved as a language proficiency person. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to come back on that?
I think, other local authorities do interview their applicants, and they make a judgment as to whether they feel that the person speaking to them can speak sufficiently, well to be able to communicate with passengers, etc., etc. I think my concern around that, and that's something we did consider, was actually we need to prove the competency of the person that's making that assessment, and that's sort of fine where people speak very good English, but where you have that as an assessment process where people are on the cusp of that, as I say, even if it's just somebody's accent, I might understand somebody with an accent better than my colleague does. So I think without formal training, and it's difficult to ensure that people are competent to make that assessment. And I think it just opens us up as a council to criticism that in complaint that actually, because of somebody's race, colour, sexuality, whatever, we've failed them because, I feel much more confident having a more defined system where, the test is set by somebody that's competent to set the test. There are other elements, other opportunities that they can do to sit down on a face-to-face basis and to make that assessment without any training and support for our staff, I think is a difficult thing to do. As I say, it's fine where it's a very easy assessment, but where that assessment is on the cusp, it can put officers in a difficult position, particularly where they haven't had any training. If we're challenged over that, the first thing they'll say is, well, what qualifications have you got to assess this person to decide whether their English is sufficient enough? I can quantify that with the tests and that we've got there.
Councillor Chukwu.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Do you charge for this test?
There's no additional charge for this test now.
Okay, my concern is about people that actually, English is not their first language, right? And they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle to do the test. And my question is, how long, if somebody failed the test, how long is it going to take for the person to come back for the second time?
Realistically, we run the tests. We have tests every week. In some occasions they're being run 2 or 3 times a week. So there is always an opportunity to come in relatively quickly and resit a test. I think, if somebody fails this particular section, then it's not necessarily something you might want to come back in and have another go straight away. It's entirely down to them, but we can certainly facilitate them to come in and resit the test straight away. Sometimes with the knowledge test, if they were very close, they're 1 mark off, we allow them to resit it again that day, because it might just be nerves, it might just be something else, just to allow them. They've done the test once, they know what it's like, they could sit it again. So I don't see it necessarily being a part of or being a bar to them sort of getting their licence. For the majority, for most, if not all of our existing drivers, I can't see any of them having an issue in passing that quite easily. It would be for new applicants to come through, but it's not just that assessment. They've got to pass the rest of the knowledge test. They've got to know what the law says. They've got to know the terms and conditions of their licence. So if they struggle with the English language side of it, they're probably going to find the other bit much harder than that side of it.
Yeah, I think you've made it really clear that this test should be passed, is easy enough to pass. I just wonder if, maybe at a later date you could send us an example of it. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, I think you've made it really clear that if you failed this test, you really should be considering if you should be a taxi driver.
So yeah, I mean, I can certainly demonstrate. Sorry, if you want to come in and you want to take the test at some point, I can do that for you. So.
Councillor Maney, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't know if I misheard or I haven't read the report properly, but I think, Paul, you just said there isn't a cost to the applicant, but it says at 3.2 these tests cost in the region of £150.
No, so that's not our test. That's the other test that was another option for them to take. So which is where they would sit if they're taking their citizenship sort of test. That test would be £150. This assessment, this test that we're going to provide, there would be no charge for that.
But is there a cost to the council for providing that service?
I mean, it's the officer time. It's going to be 10 minutes of the officer time. It's not really rechargeable in as much as anything. It gets absorbed as part of the normal taxi licensing fee. So, and the system we've got is existing. It's just taken a few hours to have this, to develop this. So it's minimal, really.
Councillor Onanaji.
Thank you. Just a clarity. Did you say knowledge-based test or just English language test?
So this element will be just English language. You won't have to have studied or anything like that. It's not asking technical questions around taxi licensing. It's just an English-based test.
Okay. Has everyone said and asked everything? Right, okay. The recommendation is that the Licensing Committee agrees to amend Appendix E of the Council's taxi licensing policy as detailed in Appendix 1 of this report. I would like to tag on to this that we get legal advice, English and British people, do they really have to take this test? And we'd like to know what laws they're compelled to do this under. I wouldn't add that as another recommendation, but it's one of these things I'd like to find out, please.
Chair, I mean, obviously, if members want that as an additional recommendation, then obviously there's a seconder. We can include that. But obviously, members obviously made it quite clear that that's their wish that they want that looked into. We can have it within the minutes, and then that's obviously as an action rather that.
Could do it as an action rather than yeah, as an action, please. Okay, so are we in agreement to pass the recommendation that the Licensing Committee agrees to amend Appendix?
Thank you. I haven't got a problem with that. It's just, should we not have a legal advisor at these committees? I mean, I won't naming them. I was at other committees recently, I'm aware of other committees where legal issues have come up, and there seems to be a creeping disappearance of legal officers at these committees where these things can be answered. Not something to be answered now, but perhaps something to it seems like COVID has done away with legal advice. We are a regulatory committee. We've been asked to agree these policies, and we're having to ask officers to go back and report back on legal advice. We really wish to surely have a legal officer here to ask.
That would be very nice, wouldn't it? Perhaps we could do that in the future.
It comes back to one of the points that have been made of the authority as a whole: poor decision making, because highly paid legal officers are at home tonight, when really, as a regulatory committee, agreeing policies that have legal implications, we're having to ask, can you go away, find legal advice and come back? I think, it's a message we need to send. We expect to have a legal officer here.
Right, team. Like any sub-licensing committee. Perhaps we could put that as a recommendation or requirement. Thank you. Councillor Maney.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, we'll take that back. And
Okay then. Apart from that, are we all in agreement for the changes? Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. Make that the last piece of work on our agenda for tonight. So, thank you very much for your participation and your wisdom, and also your time. Thanks to the council officer and our clerk as well, so our hard-pressed legal council officer and licensing officer and clerk. And I wish you all a good night and a safe journey home. Good night.